Okay, so you are Jess and you run
Yeah.
the Longarm League, which is
Okay. So yes. Hello and welcome. Not welcome. Um, Thanks for having me, Megan. I live in central Iowa with my husband and my kids, and I started just loving to quilt in peace, and I increasingly loved the long arm quilting part. So I knew fairly early on that that was going to be my focus, and so I got a long arm machine in 2012 and was serving clients in all sorts of capacity. Um, well, from free motion quilting, doing custom work, and then eventually in 2017, getting a IntelliQuilter and moving to computerized. So I've seen a little bit of the spectrum of business type venture and as a long arm quilter. And then it was 2019, because we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary, that I was noticing on social media. I'm most active on Instagram. I was fielding just a lot of questions about long arm quilting from other long arm quilters who were wanting similar results to what I was getting and the kind of quilting that I was doing, which by this time, after all the iterations, it had been mostly like geometric, dense designs on modern quilts. And so I felt like that was kind of like the niche that I had carved out for myself in the long arm quilting space. And so I was thinking, like, I really love interacting with other quilters. I would love to systematize sort of an information dump on people so that I could answer many people at the same time, as I really love that aspect. And mostly this was all happening through Instagram direct messages. So it's been a little over 2 years then that I started an email newsletter list. Just let me tell you everything I know about long arm quilting. And it was intense. Like, it would take me 8 to 10 hours probably for every newsletter I would send out, like just really wanting to be thorough, wanting, providing the links, like making sure I could set up everybody to do like the kind of quilting that I was doing, or the things that I had learned over years that really changed the game for me. So that was like the little baby Longarm League. And then we opened in August of 2019 to kind of formalize it, inviting like the founding members to pay a monthly subscription for me to provide weekly content to them, similar to what they had been getting in the newsletters. So that was how it started. And oh my gosh, like it's really changed a lot since then. And my love and enthusiasm for it is as great as ever. And so that is what we do now in the Longarm League. It's a combination of I design digital pantographs, so I send out one per month to our members. We do a lesson of some sort about either quilting or business, or a combination of both. We do monthly group calls so that we can all get together and talk about what the lesson was just about. That's like a week later. I'm going through like our weekly schedule. And then we also record interviews like this and post them for our membership to watch. So that way they can get a peek behind the scenes for all of these different long arm quilting businesses. When we had people so at the beginning, most everybody who joined, they were already long arm quilting in some capacity, mostly for their clients. And we would start getting people who came into the league having never done it before and never been in business before, maybe just got their machines and didn't really know how to start. And so we realized at that point in time, we didn't have a good system for like bringing people into the beginning steps. And so at that point in time, it was in January of this year, we began offering rookie season, which is like now it's an 8-week course. It keeps getting longer. No, but like the getting started steps a lot of times when people are investing in machines, you know, they're spending a lot of money on the machines and they want to be in business, but they just don't know how to do that and make that happen. And so we take them through like a step-by-step getting started process where we'll talk about the things that they'll need to know in business. So that is where we are now. We have the rookie season and then the membership, and I get to talk about quilting all day, every day. So it really works well for me because I love it.
Okay, well, that transitions nicely because the kind of a lot of the questions I get are, I just finished a quilt. How do I find a longarmer? And I know, like, because you're teaching people kind of the business side of longarming, one of the things you have is a directory. And I think that's a really great tool for my viewers who are looking for a longarmer, because you know that the people in that directory have this kind of business experience behind them and they have kind of a certain amount of training. So how many people are in the directory?
Oh gosh, I don't know. Probably I would guess around 150 to 200 at this point. Not everybody who is in the league chooses to be in the directory for a variety of reasons. We have some very experienced folks who they have their client base. They're just trying to maintain what they have and keep their heads above water, to be honest with you. And so we don't have, not everybody in the league is listed on the directory, but we have, if it's not all 50 states at this point, it's probably getting close. But yeah, I wanted to bridge this gap between the piecers because it's confusing when you call, we're all quilters, right? But it's confusing to distinguish. So oftentimes in the league, we'll call piecers, and then quilters like long. That's kind of how we distinguish. But to bridge the gap between the piecers and the long arm quilters who want to love them, that's the goal of the directory. And so we have longarmleague.com/directory is where you can find a map of the United States and Canada, and where like a star for every quilter who is serving, is currently serving other people by providing long arm quilting services. Most, I would say the majority, are providing edge to edge digital quilting, but we do have some custom quilters. We have some hand guided folks. So what you'll see on the directory page is the map. So if it's important to you to kind of hone in on your area or region, that's very doable. And then we have a table that you can search based on service too. If you know that you're looking for a certain kind of quilting, or maybe it's very important to you for mobility reasons or whatever to have like your quilt trimmed when it's returned to you. If you need binding services done, there's an option where you can search based on the services that the long arm quilter is providing. And so that directory listing is going to have a one-stop shop to look at their location, what services they offer, also with links to their own websites and social media accounts too, because and I tell our quilters this, is that when you say look on Instagram, you're looking at a resume of work essentially, and that brings a lot of peace to a piecer, to be able to look at their past work and say like, oh, I love this quilting. I love the choices they made with the pairing of the pantograph design with this, modern quilt. So we think that is important too, because a lot of this, you don't necessarily have to be in the same region as someone else to have them quilt for you. When I was just kind of before the league started, almost, I would say 95% of the people I quilted for were not in my area at all. I was doing all mail-in work. So I would get quilts from Alaska. I would get quilts from another town in Iowa. That's where I'm from. I already said that. Um, just all Florida, I mean, everywhere. A few Canadians. Yeah, that's the beauty of, of the internet and being able to match your style with, someone else not having to be restricted by your area.
Yeah, those priority mailboxes make it possible to ship it anywhere. Do you know about the board game boxes at the post office?
Okay, so this is a mystery to me, Megan, because there are a lot of people who get those long board game boxes, and my folding skills must not be up to snuff. I had a hard time because they're only 3 inches tall.
Yeah, it's not.
Or wide.
Batting.
Some people swear by them and love them, but I must have my folding game off, because what I would typically do if it was larger than a large flat rate, I would source my own boxes that were like 10 by 12 by 12. But I think anything up to 12 by 12 by 12 is like, you don't have to pay the next level of hugeness. And I would routinely be able to, maybe not multiple quilts, but I feel like that let me get almost every size up to a king back to a client. But yeah, those game board boxes, some people are just, I must just not do it right.
Yeah, but you can definitely, I think almost all longarmers that I talk to are totally open to shipping quilts back and forth. So I think it's great to be able to use Instagram and the directory to find a quilter that you really are like super excited to work with, rather than just like the one down the street. So you really
Absolutely
have that ability now.
Absolutely. Yep, that's a great point. When I had just started quilting for other people, I only was serving the clients in my own town and metro area. And my business changed so much when I was able to expand and be able to do the mail-in stuff. And I felt like as a quilter too, like it brought me a lot of joy and excitement to work on the quilts that I would have been piecing myself. Like I would get so many ideas and I would get excited, and that excitement just makes your work more fun and rewarding, I think.
Absolutely. Because this is a job for the longarmers. Like, this is how they pay their bills and how they pay for their gigantic machine. So it is really great for both quilters and longarmers to be excited about the process. So finding someone you're excited to work with is great for everyone. So don't be afraid to like contact a longarmer that you may have just found through Instagram, or that you haven't met in person or anything, because odds are if their style matches your style, then they're just as excited as you are. So
absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. All right. I'm looking through my list of questions. Okay. You mentioned computerized, hand-guided, edge-to-edge. I feel like there's some terminology that kind of longarmers use that piecers aren't as familiar with. So what is the difference between a computerized edge-to-edge and a hand-guided edge-to-edge?
Well, I don't know that when I was quilting when I very first started and I didn't have the computerized component, I would just call them all over designs, which were the same they were the same all across the quilt. So whether you have a block-based quilt or a art quilt that wasn't block-based, or you had borders or not, you're getting one style, one motif, one design across the whole quilt. I also call I guess I'll talk about pantograph a little bit too, because I think that there's some misconceptions around there. And honestly, I've seen it referred to in a number of different ways. So I think that there are multiple terms that make sense for this, but sometimes if people hear pantograph, they're going to think about the roll of paper that you put at the back of I'm pointing here, back of the longarm machine on the table. And then the quilter from the back of the machine is moving the carriage, following along a line to then quilt that pattern on the quilt top that is loaded on the frame. And so a lot of times when I say pantograph now, people think of the paper, but there are digital pantographs that still have, I guess the essence of that is a repeating design that is going to continue and be uniform, I guess, across the whole quilt. So I use digital panto a lot. I use edge to edge. You'll see E to E. And so that is like the same pattern, just repeated across. So when you're doing free motion quilting, you can still do a repeated motif, but it's not going to be exactly the same and uniform as what a pantograph might be, either the paper or the digital. And let's see what else. Oh, and then of course, like custom quilting can be done either with free motion, hand guided is what we also call that. Or it can be done with a computer, and a quilter can program what they want in a specific block, and the computer will, or the robotics will help that machine put it in the exact area that is designated by the quilter. And so some of these things it's confusing because you can have custom quilting that's digital, you can have custom quilting that's hand guided or free motion, and the same is true with the edge to edge. It can be free motion or computerized.
All right. I have a list of questions that were I kind of grouped these, and these are kind of
Okay.
like I'm a beginner quilter. So I got several questions that were, I'm a beginner. I know my quilt isn't perfect. Is the longarmer going to laugh at me? Or should I bother having it sent to a longarmer? There were a lot of concerns about like people not being very confident in their piecing. So can you like give them a little pep talk?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, where do I start? You're worthy. Your piecing is good enough. Like I would get these beautiful quilts and then messages along the lines of, I hope this doesn't break your machine. Like, oh, if you could only see some of the things that we've dealt with. But I can speak for myself personally. I was always so delighted. There's something special about for a long arm quilter to finish the very first quilt that you ever piece, because I mean, it's just like we got into this because we love quilting and we know that it's addictive. We know what it's like to put that last seam in the quilt and be so excited, but also then, oh my gosh, this is embarrassing, but I'm going to share this. The first quilt, like I got a book, I got my sister helped me buy all the materials, and I finally sewed the whole top together, got the borders on everything. And I remember turning it over to the backside and being like, well, what happens now? Because this doesn't look like all my grandma's quilts. Like I'm missing some steps. Like I didn't even think through the process far enough to know what happened. Like, okay, these are raw seams on the back. Like, I don't know how to fix this. And then the instructions say quilt as desired, which is like, okay.
I have a shirt that says that quilt is desired.
No way. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I mean, you're going to go, and that was at the time of like 2005, 2006, where blogs were just starting to be a thing. But I was trying to find information in books, and it was like, it seems so overwhelming, but think about how much more you're going to love those results. Like give yourself a chance. I think by sending your quilt to a long arm quilter, you can have that gratification of having your work be elevated almost in a way. I mean, as opposed to like, if you're starting with just the piecing, then there is so much to know about the quilting process that, and I don't want to be like fear-based and stuff, but my results were way less than ideal. And it was kind of, I don't want to say disappointing because I was still proud overall. But when I think about what somebody else would have been able to do with that quilt top, I think like, oh, wow, it would have been a different experience. And also I think more like to encourage you to keep piecing and wanting to like start cutting out that next project is fun. So it was a delight, and it was a special treat to be able to quilt someone's first quilt. I have never broken my machine on any quilt. There sometimes when you're beginning, there will be some issues, but especially if your long arm quilter has a little bit of experience, and all of us who have been doing it for 6 months are going to see some things, right? And
all dealt with open seams and wobbly borders and
yes,
all those things, like bulky seams. Like your longarmer will know how to deal with that and how to best guide you to a great finished product. So yeah, I totally agree. Like, I don't think anyone should be afraid to send their first quilt out, or a quilt that they're a little nervous about. Because, I mean, we all had our first quilt too. So,
yes,
you know, we
absolutely. 100%. And I don't know, it was just, I felt like it was even more special because I wanted to have a hand in like making them fall in love with quilting. And like, for me, it's like, yes, bring more people in.
come join us.
Yes.
Okay. And then I have a group of questions that are kind of about the process of getting a quilt to a longarmer, kind of what to expect. How much information do you as a longarmer want to have about what someone wants the final quilt to look like? Do you, I'm just trying to think how to phrase it, because this was like 7 questions. So I'm trying to condense them all.
Oh, sure.
Should I have like a design picked out, or how do you feel about when someone brings you a quilt and they're like, do whatever you want? Like,
Yeah.
you think most longarmers have a preference? Like they would like, I want this design on this quilt, or I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm going to answer it this way because this is the honest truth about like what I can say about my journey. That doesn't faze me at all. If somebody were to say like, I just don't know, I would be happy, very happy to like, what I would do is typically pick my top 5 designs that I think would look so good on the quilt. And I would text my clients and say like, is any one of these speaking to you? It doesn't have to be one of these, but if you could let me know from this group of 5, like where you're leaning toward. And but I guess what I wanted to say about my honesty part is that that confidence came with time and experience. And so if it's a brand new quilter, they first sometimes, and again, like if you're mailing it out, you might not have a relationship with that person and you have no idea what they like. You're not friends. You're not in the same guild. Like you really don't know what they're into. So, that can be especially intimidating as a newer quilter, being, like, I just don't even know where to start. So a few of the things that I would have in mind as a piecer, is there any, in your quilts that you've seen, or as you're scrolling on Instagram, or if you're on Facebook groups and pages or whatever, is there quilting that you really don't like? I like to ask, if it's somebody that I have no idea what they're into, how do you feel about feathers? Because that can be different. I love feathers. I mean, I don't think you can be a quilter and not, no, just kidding. A longarm quilter. I get there's piecers that don't like feathers. That's fine. And they can vary, they can be very traditional, very modern. There's a lot of choices these days, but I would ask questions about, like, typically my go-to questions were, how do you feel about feathers? Are feathers okay with you? Hearts are another thing, or something very floral. Those helped me, if they had a strong opinion about any one of those things, then it helped me a lot to be able to be even more confident. Like, I think you'll like this design if you feel that, if you're okay with these other things. So even if you don't know what you want, having an idea and being able to communicate what you're not into is extremely helpful too. And sometimes we don't think about what we don't like, but that would be a good thing to start with. But I always liked I would typically like have some ideas that would immediately pop into my head as a quilter. And so just starting with, if I have 200 or 500, or I don't even know how many designs that I have loaded into my computer ready to go, that's an overwhelming thing. So I would get some ideas of like, and two, in my experience, I could recall times that a certain quilting looked really good with a certain type of a top. And so I was able to recall my experiences and, give a top 5 of things of designs that I would know would be successful and look really good. And then we would just go from there. So don't be I'm one example. And even among the league, we are not dictating this isn't how you need to run your business as another long arm quilter. You might request service from someone where they need you to choose a design before you submit the quilt, or submit a work request. And, of course, this can also direct you if you need some help and you need some guidance, you might want to work with somebody who would be open to doing that consultation with you before the work would begin. And I would say, for the league and the quilters that I know and work with, they all want such good results and for a client to be really happy that I can't foresee a situation where they said would say, I would not help you through your design choices. But yeah, that could influence, that might be something to look for as a piecer if you're not confident in quilts to begin with, or your design choices to begin with. And I would also say, use your save button on Instagram, like where you can save quilting that you really like. If you're piecing a quilt, you don't have to search the hashtags. Like you don't have to come up with a plan right away. But if there's quilting that like just stops you in your tracks and really wows you, just hit that save button on Instagram. Or if you're on Pinterest, make a board of quilting designs that you like. Showing examples of the things that you like would be a very concrete way to communicate with your quilter about like which direction you want to go into. Say that again.
Kind of like going to get a haircut.
Yes. Oh, those books, those huge books serving up looks of all kinds. Yes. Yeah, I think that is a great way to start. And I felt like I was going to say something else about that, but I lost it, whatever it was.
Like if you are sewing or piecing a fairly popular pattern, then odds are your longarmer may have already quilted that a couple of times. So they already have some really great ideas for how to finish that quilt that they know is going to look great. So I think that also kind of blends nicely into thread choices, which was a big concern with people. Like, how do I choose thread when I might be mailing a quilt to someone and, I can't like hold it up to my quilt. So you think that most longarmers have a pretty good idea of the colors that blend really well versus standing out really well, and how to choose the right color that's going to really complement your quilt?
Okay, I don't want to say that this is a disconnect, but I'm one person. I was never too precious about thread color. I mean, to me, what my aesthetic and what I tried to do was I wanted like the texture of the quilting to be the standout. I mean, not to overpower the top, but to me, it was the repeated texture that was my goal, is to have that part really complement the piecing. So what I would do is would try to blend the quilting to the lighter areas of the top, because I didn't want the thread to stand out. I wanted just the texture to stand out and not too muddy. I don't want to say muddy because that's a pejorative term. Like, I mean, just I wanted the quilt. I didn't want it to be thread. Like, oh, look at the thread. But, there's some tops that are like the contrasting thread can look amazing. And so I think the biggest thing to think about and to talk through with your quilter is, do you want it to blend or do you want it to contrast? And then they're going to be really good about finding that, either the blending thread, which I tended to use so many neutrals, and very few times would I be like color matching. But you would also be surprised, if you've ever appliqued and you're picking the thread that it's not quite the same, but you're really surprised at the end where like, oh my gosh, that actually looks really good. I think a similar principle applies for choosing the quilting thread. I don't know that you need to send samples necessarily, or usually your quilter is gonna have a wide array to choose from. And there were times where I could tell that it was a very important decision to my client, and I would pull out all the ones that I had, snap a picture in good lighting to just say like, okay, starting at this one, two, three, like, what do you think about these choices? That was something I was always willing to work with. And that was more like a hand holding, I want you to feel comfortable type of a thing. But honestly, at the end, there are times where I look at quilts that I've done in the past, even for myself, that I can't, is that off white? Is that true white? Is that cream? Like, I don't think it's as an important of a choice as some people give it. So and maybe that should, instead of being a negative thing, I don't want that to intimidate a person not knowing what thread choice to use, because I feel like that's the last thing you're thinking about when you're seeing the quilt done and it's amazing and you're like, and then it's not like, wait a minute, is that whatever number
or 702?
Right.
701 gray or 702 silver. So yeah, I think, when you see that cone of thread, it gives you a very different impression than like the single line of stitching. So trust your Longarmer that they can tell what's going to blend versus stand out. Because sometimes, like, I love using contrasting thread.
Yeah.
So, like, I have a whole wall of super bright colors and I love that look. But if that's not your look, then just tell your Longarmer, because they'll be able to guide you. And, they'll have your quilt and all their thread when they're trying to match. So it's a lot easier for them kind of to put that together.
Right. And again, with that too, even when I'm laying it out across the top, it's still not like a stitch. I mean, it's probably as close as we can get without actually stitching it out and then audition it. So yeah, I agree with what you said. The biggest thing to communicate there is, do you want it to blend or do you want it to stand out? Because in the right circumstances, like that's also just a very cool detail to have that contrast. But yeah.
Okay. I have a group of questions about cost. And
sure.
Something that's going to vary, I think, a lot based on region, based on quilter, based on design. But I think the calculation of cost is, I think, what a lot of the questions were getting to. Like, how can I kind of guess how much it's going to cost to get my quilt quilted and what's included in that, or what may be included in that? So where do you think most Longarmers kind of break down their cost?
Do you mean like, okay, so I would say the majority of quilters are going to charge based on square inch price. And so that is when you take the width times the length and then multiply it by whatever their rate is. So I try to tell people, I'm giving you the inside scoop from the long arm perspective. I don't want to see quilters pricing for under 2 cents per square inch. I feel like that is probably, anything under that makes me think, oh, that sounds like discount quilting. I wonder if that's any good. That's a hot take, honest take on that. And it's, even though it feels like it's a big charge, it also, like, there's a lot of steps and you're paying for someone's expertise. You're paying for like them to have, all their equipment. Okay. So the square inch price is what I see as typical. Sometimes there will be a thread fee, and that would all be should be listed on whatever website, or if you send a direct message or you talk to a long arm quilter, you could just ask what their fees are. Sometimes, depending on their state, they'll have to charge sales tax for something like that, which can be, if you have a huge quilt, it can be a sizable chunk too. So maybe that's something that you can think to ask about. Other common charges, I guess, would be if there's like if you want to have your backing pieced, like that would be another thing that you could ask your quilter about. If you just have like yardage and you want it to be your backing, sometimes they'll do per seam or however long it takes them to do. If there's significant repairs that might need to be done, your long arm quilter might charge a little more for that. If I was in a situation, I would talk to my client first and just let them know, this is what I'm seeing. Here are some options. How would you like to proceed with this? Every quilter is a little bit different, so I can't say that is standard across the board, but usually if it's going to be an additional charge that you weren't foreseeing, that they'll make contact with you ahead of time to kind of work that out. But square inch price, any piecing, thread charges are pretty common. I like the simplicity of just rolling everything up into a square inch price. And so you might not, I can't even say the majority do or do not, because it's just all different. But I liked for someone to be able to just do the simple math of width times length times my square inch price and know that was going to be what the charge was. But yeah, that's something to think about. Custom quilting can be much more. And if you could maybe get a range of sometimes especially if you don't know the quilting that you're going to choose in the end, again, like I try to keep everything simple. So every design I did had the same square inch price, but it totally makes sense business-wise. If you're doing like a huge meander stipple, something like that, that might be different than a very dense, intricate design, even though it's computerized. But fun fact, computerized quilting is not poking a button and walking away. There's so much involved in it. And even before we're talking about getting it close to the machine, there is the time sometimes for consults, for, post office runs. It took me a minimum of like 30 minutes to 45 minutes just to box a quilt up appropriately and to get it ready to be mailed out. There is, the business invoicing costs. There's sometimes it's a lot of back and forth getting to the design and to the thread color and to the batting choices and all that kind of stuff. Not to say that your long arm quilter is going to charge you extra for that, but just to know the loading process. I mean, that was something that I was really particular about. So I really slowed down and took my time and did a really careful job with the loading. Cause I just personally think that once you load it up appropriately, it's just, you're going to have the best results possible if everything's ready to go. So that's a very time intensive thing. So it is not, I would try to, in a typical workday, get one quilt done a day. And there are people who either with multiple machines, or they're just a lot faster, or they run their machines a lot faster. That was kind of what I was shooting for, is to get one lap size or queen size quilt done in a whole day. So, it isn't poking a button and walking away. I feel like that's a public service announcement from all the quilters to all the users.
Absolutely. I was quilting a quilt one time and I sent my mom a picture of like me about to start. And then like an hour and a half later, it was a small quilt. An hour and a half later, I was like, look, I'm done quilting. She's like, it only took you an hour and a half. And I was like, well, it took me an hour and a half plus an hour to load it. And, tens of thousands of dollars to buy a machine and a room in my house and hundreds of hours to learn how to quilt. So it's like, you see that little slice of, time that it takes, but you're paying for a lot more. Like there's a lot of experience and a lot of time that's rolled into that per square inch, price that you're paying.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely.
So yes, on behalf of all longarmers, like we care. we're not just overpricing our work. Like we really care. We want a really good job. And I know like in the Longarm League forums, even like all the members and all the people who post there are really proud of their work and they really want to do a good job. And so, this is something that they care about as well. So
yes. Yep.
Okay. So this is something that I think is going to vary significantly from longarmer to longarmer. But what is a turnaround time? Because I know some longarmers can turn it around in a couple of days, whereas others have significant waiting lists. So what would you tell someone who's looking for a longarmer who needs a quilt done super fast?
Yeah. And this might be how you make your choice. Because and again, a lot of times it comes with experience. The more you're serving other people, and especially if you're we were at a quilting show maybe last month, and a longarm dealer was saying, if you can produce quality work, you're never going to have to worry about having enough clients because they're going to flock to you. And I think that is very true. It depends on so many things, but I felt like I didn't actually, but I felt like I was going to break out in hives at the beginning if I had like a longer than 2-week turnaround time. Cause I just felt like I'm failing everyone. And like, I can only do one a day and I have 3 kids and all, just juggling schedules. And there was I wanted to do such good work on such a short time frame that it bothered me. And it was something that I had to kind of just like grow through when you can only do one quilt at a time, if you have one machine, then those short turnaround times are not always possible. But that I would just, if there's someone that you have identified, and some quilters will accept your quilt on a rush basis and pay you an extra fee. And I think that is I haven't looked at the directory, all of the service options recently, but I believe rush service availability is one of the service options that you can search on with the league member directory. But at the end, I was still just doing edge to edge digital quilting. And I had there at the end there, it was like I'd had a quilt. I had some quilts for 8 months or so. And because I had over 60 up in my closet at one point in time. And it's just like, sometimes it feels like, oh my gosh, they don't stop coming. But if it is an important part, you can ask about a rush service, or, if you're, if the time frame is important, that's just a simple call or email or direct message, what's your turnaround time about right now? And that, that's life too. I fly by the seat of my pants too. Like if I'm going to give a gift. And so if you might just have to base your decision based on what their availability is, or if they're willing to rush it for you.
So lesson learned, it's July. Start getting your Christmas quilts done soon if you want to send them out to a longarmer.
And I should say, that was for digital edge to edge. If you're wanting custom work of any kind, I feel like this might be my perception, but my inclination is that there are fewer of us these days and that their times could be extended by 10x what what a digital quilter or an edge-to-edge quilter maybe would be more accurate, would be able to do. So get those in early. If it's like for a show quilt, I wouldn't, for a really good custom quilter, you want to be contacting them 6 months to a year, maybe. I mean, like that is not an unheard of thing, I guess, is what I'm trying to communicate.
Because I know, like, if I'm doing an edge-to-edge quilt, it might be a day that my machine is tied up. But
Right.
like right now, I have a custom quilt of my own that I might enter the show, but I expect I have at least 30 hours of quilting to go on that. And it's all hand guided with rulers. But I mean, 30 hours, that's a really long time. And if your quilter is primarily a custom quilter, like times that by all the quilts she or he may be getting in,
Yes,
it's quite a long wait. So if you want custom work, just kind of factor that into your time frame.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last kind of section I have, I did have one miscellaneous question that I think is definitely going to vary by quilter. Like, can I send 2 little quilts on the same backing?
Oh yeah. We love it. We love efficiency and typically hate to load. So that means you're loading once and that you can either do it side by side. I've done it one after another if it was just like a lot of long yardage. But that's our favorite, and it's efficient for everyone. So yes, please.
Yes. Awesome. Okay, so this next section is about bad experiences with longarmers. And I know all longarmers, we're all people, but how do you best avoid a bad experience with a longarmer, I guess? Like, one of the questions I got specifically was she took a quilt to a longarmer and had this consultation and left her quilt and then picked it up, and the prices had changed. It wasn't the batting she wanted. So I feel like a lot of this boils down to the intake process. And I would tell her, like, if you take your quilt to a longarmer who doesn't have you sign an estimate or fill out an intake form, maybe that's not the best longarmer to leave your quilt with. Like, how important do you think the intake form is?
Well, I have a different perspective because to me, it's a matter of like being organized and being efficient. And so I think it's really important, but that was from my ability to work through my queue in a reasonable time. But I mean, I think this all boils down to if it's a form that that it's an online form that you get an email copy of, and that your quilter can refer to it later. If it's a handwritten form, I mean, all of these are positives. And I guess even more high level, it comes down to communication. And I think, your quilter probably will have a system down if they've been doing it for any length of time. And following the normal process is probably the best way to go about it. But yeah, communication is essential. When they tell you that they need extra backing, please listen. Please, I'm begging you, listen. That was probably one of the most common things that would really like put it really delays everything if you're not providing what the longarm quilter is asking for. And I don't want to say that it might not give you the results that you're looking for if they don't have enough room to work with. And hopefully, they'll communicate any issues that arise. But I just noticed that in my, from my business, that was always the most difficult thing. Especially if it's a mail-in and you open it, our goal is to try to make it work as best as we can with the materials that you've provided. And so if everybody has enough backing and we've communicated, then those are, I mean, that's just going to set you up for better results. But yeah, communication is key. And if there is something that you're really concerned about, like maybe you did have problems, and maybe I could take this time right now to talk about borders on quilts before I was a longarm quilter, I did the slap-on borders too. So it's not a judgment, but aside from not having the right amount, a big enough backing, the most difficult thing to deal with was a quilt with borders that were not measured ahead of time. And you would be shocked, quite frankly, if, like there have been quilters that I don't think I've ever had to do this, but like actually detach the border, and there could be 3 or 4 inches extra longer than what the actual top is. And you just don't notice because you don't have like a walking foot on, or it's not an even type of feed system. You can get a lot of extra fabric on a border. And I think that was another very common issue, is if you have a quilt that has borders, please measure the quilt top first, then cut your borders to size. And I became such a stickler on myself, because that wasn't the results I wanted for myself either, is to have any fullness in the border. So I'm always, I even pin the borders to the top, and I also use a walking foot because I just want the even feed. Like I want them to be straight and not wonky and no fullness. So, yeah, that would be a issue that would be fairly common, I guess. And what was there anything else I wanted to say about that? Yeah, like what you're saying, we're human too. I served a lot of customers and I did it very well and I cared so much, but there were a handful of times in the last 9 years that either I screwed up or our signals got crossed, and there were, not every time ends in joy and celebration. There were hard conversations, and it just does happen. I think the clearer you said, like the intake form is, the more communication that if you're following their system, then I think that is the thing to lead to the happiest results. Nobody likes to think about it or talk about it, but it's a reality.
But I would say 99% of long arming goes really smoothly and everybody's really happy in the end. But
oh yeah,
long arms are big, heavy, crazy machines that go really fast. And, as much as we are professionals who do this all the time, like it's a big machine, and it might have a problem, and we'll do our best to work with you to correct it. But, it's a reality, but 9.9% of the time it's awesome.
Well, and I said, over 9 years, I can think of maybe 5 that were like, oh boy, those are not, it brings up bad feelings and we want to do such a great job that it's a painful, it's not just like, oh, well, I got my money, whatever. It's usually a very painful process on both sides, and that can happen in any business whatsoever, especially when there's a service type of exchange.
Yeah. But find a longarmer who's super excited about her job, and it's most likely going to be a really smooth process. So
I agree.
Okay. I think that is all the questions I had.
Your audience has had great questions. I'm very impressed.
I did have a few of people who asked about starting a long arm business. So people who were interested in it or already had a long arm and wanted to get their name out there. So I did want to say that the Longarm League is really amazing. Like I joined, I paid full price, and I'm going to do it again. Like it's a really great resource. So if you are a long armer who's thinking about doing this professionally, then I really encourage you to go to Jess's website, longarmleague.com, and I'll put a little thing here, and the link will be in the description below this video, that you can go and check it out and find out all of the benefits. And if you are just thinking about getting a machine, then it's a really great place to start because you learn how to set up a website, how to, establish your business, because there are like legal issues, like legal hoops that you're going to have to jump through. Like I know I have an LLC, I have separate bank accounts. Like it's a legit deal. It's a real business. So if you don't know where to start, then Longarm League is a really great way to kind of get that hand-holding process through the beginning. So.
Totally agree. Get on our mailing list too, because the more time that we are serving our clients, the more we know what kind of resources to provide. And so we're trying to build, like I said in the beginning, everyone that came through, already had a long arm, but now we're fielding a lot of questions about what to buy and what to, like when you're still in the thinking about phase, there's so many questions. So we're continually trying to build out our resources to serve people who are just even thinking and wanting to do the exploratory stuff. And Megan, you were on our call. We did a Zoom call with small groups where you could just talk to a bunch of people who had the same equipment that you were interested in. And so I think the best way, get on our mailing list, because we'll always promote or talk about those calls when they're coming up. And we're trying to build out our resources all the time. So we'd love to have you.
And the hashtag Longarm League on Instagram is full of Longarm League members who I'm sure that if you contacted them, they would be happy to talk about their machine. So
yes.
If you have questions about that or want, a different perspective on a different machine, then check out the hashtag on Instagram because it's full of quilty eye candy too. So
totally. Yes. And there's so many different ways to do a business too. There's lots of different brands that you can buy used, you can buy new, you can do computerized, you can do freehand, you can quilt twice a month if you want to for clients, or you can get 4 machines and have your very own little factory. There's just such a variety of a way to do business. The flexibility is awesome. And being able to work from home is beautiful. Like COVID was most of our quilters didn't experience a slowdown. If anything, people were home and sewing more. And so there's never been a lull or a period where there was no work to be found. You were piecers, how much you're making your quilts. There seems like there's a lot of business potential there.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of long armers in my area, but I get questions like I don't really quilt for clients, but I still get people asking me all the time, like, will you do my quilt? And it's like for friends, I generally will. But if you want to do this as a business, then it's totally possible. Yeah. You can really have a great little business, and it can be as full-time or part-time as you want it to be. So.
Right. Yep.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it. I encourage everyone to check out the Longarm League, and Jess was just a lovely little addition. This was my first interview on the channel, so it was really great to have you on.
Well, I'm so glad that you asked me. It's been a pleasure.